Okay, I am Sebastian and I am here with Chris
Hey, what's up?
and Rodney. How you doing, Rodney?
Oh, I couldn't be better, guys. Glad to be back as always.
Would you like to do a quick plug for Pod Forsaken just because you're here?
I mean, I do it like almost every time. We do a podcast with me and my co-host called Pod Forsaken Horror Podcast. We talk about horror movies you probably haven't seen. So if you're a horror fan, you should come check it out.
You definitely should. What's the latest thing that you saw and really liked that you don't think anyone's seen?
Oh man, May the Devil Take You. Have you heard of this movie?
I have heard of it. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
It's basically the Indonesian version of Evil Dead.
Nice.
If you like Evil Dead, you have got to watch May the Devil Take You. And people say that May the Devil Take You 2 is even better, which I haven't seen yet, though.
That's something to look forward to.
You couldn't say that any more dryly, Sebastian. That sounds really great. Thank you for talking about your podcast.
That sounds great, Rodney. But we're not here to talk about horror movies. Today, we're here to talk about Ghost in the Shell, the 2017 adaptation of the very popular Japanese anime from the 90s. Now, this movie was directed by Rupert Sanders, who I believe is a British director. He directed that Snow White and the Huntsman movie and some other stuff. He famously had a fling with Kristen Stewart and broke her up from Robert Pattinson. So that was kind of where I knew him from. But I will say this. The Snow White and the Huntsman movie has some pretty cool visuals, so I thought that he was an interesting choice for this material because he definitely had a sense of visuals. Now, I have seen the original anime. I remember I saw it back in the 90s when it first came out on video. I remember it actually played in theaters in Boston where I was living at the time. I did not get out to see it. And I saw the anime then on VHS or something, and I liked it. And then I rewatched the anime again around the time that this movie came out. And I think it's a pretty good anime. I remember at the time when I first saw it, I struggled with it a little bit because I just didn't have the anime gene yet. I didn't understand really what their story sensibility was. So I don't remember loving it immediately, but I did really enjoy the anime on a second watch. Now, Chris, you have a history with the anime, correct?
That's correct. I do remember seeing it in the 90s when it first came out, probably on VHS, but unfortunately it was the English dub of it, which is horrible way to watch it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank
really,
you.
really terrible. And also, it's a good anime, but it doesn't have the same like pedigree as something like Akira, which of course is the all-time classic. So I don't hold it as like this beloved anime classic that some people do. I think it has some great scenes in it. It's got a really cool, interesting story. But as far as animation goes, there's a lot of scenes of dialogue played off on someone's back where they don't even animate the mouth, and so it seems like there's a lot of lazy actual workman animation in there. So I was a little disappointed seeing it at the time and being like, this isn't top quality, but especially the dialogue scenes, but the action was awesome. Like there, all the standout scenes, like, the shallow water scene, all that really stood out to me. But I do remember the story and the dialogue being a little lackluster.
Rodney, what is your history with the anime Ghost in the Shell?
It's almost identical to what Chris said. Like, I remember seeing it sometime in the late 90s after it had been out for a little while. I honestly don't remember how I saw it the first time. I'm pretty sure I saw it with Japanese, in the Japanese language, right? And then I didn't watch it again because I also felt like it was like, one, a little too weird for my taste, right? Like weird in a cool way. I remember being like, this is cool, but I feel like I'm a little too dumb to understand what they're talking about or something. And I understand that it is like beloved by a lot of people, but it's never been like my go-to anime. And I watch a decent amount of anime. And then I hadn't watched it again until literally this weekend. I decided to watch both in prep for the show. And I could not believe that no matter where you go out of all the streaming services, there is no Japanese language version available. Like, it's fucking 2021. Like, yeah. Please let me watch in Japanese. Because I showed it to my wife for the first time, And I like multiple times was apologizing, being like, this sounds much better in Japanese, you know?
Oh, I will say that the anime does have a lot of, pseudo philosophical moments that aren't in the actual movie. There's a lot of the characters waxing philosophic about people's ghosts and technology and all this stuff, and it's significantly more violent.
Well, one other thing that's not really in the movie is a ton of Japanese leads. And that was kind of a big deal when this movie came out. I don't know if you guys remember, but when Scarlett Johansson was cast, there was a lot of upset people on the internet complaining that they hadn't cast a Japanese actor. It more really kind of happened when the movie came out, not so much when she was cast, but it sort of really cast a pall over the production.
Oh yeah, I mean it couldn't have been timed worse. Culturally, I feel like, and I remember it being a big deal when they cast her, because they cast her and all the anime nerds were like, that is ridiculous, and this is really the main stumbling block of the movie. I feel like everybody was up in arms, and I feel like I even heard that they were trying to test visual effects to make her Asian in the movie.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
To, placate people, which even just made it worse. You're like, no, that's not the point. It was a big deal for me. I think it significantly hurt the movie.
Well, Chris, I can say a lot on this topic, but it's one of those things where it's a very complicated issue, right? And
yes.
First of all, I remember this being a really big story around this film, right? And I do agree that, look, Scarlett Johansson is out of place in this movie. She is the wrong actress for this role. However, on the one hand, I say to myself, it's an American adaptation for American audiences.
Yes.
And I don't see anything wrong with having the lead character be played by an American, right? But when I'm watching the movie, it does feel weird since they kept the movie set in Japan, Like, if the movie took place in future San Francisco, I think it would work better, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm coming down on is I don't think they made the right choice, but I don't think it's quite offensive either, because, to me it's not, because she's in a robot shell, right? And they're not saying she's a Japanese person. She's
right.
They made a white robot woman.
The filmmakers did try to assemble an international cast for the team of the movie.
Sure.
Like the police chief is Japanese, speaks in Japanese. Some of the people are from Denmark, Zimbabwe. Like there's a Chinese man from Singapore. So we have the French Juliette Binoche is in it. So they did try and pull people from all over the place and try and give an international feel. So I applaud them for that. I don't know if that's enough to really placate the miscast of the lead. But, and also, to your point, I understand that, I typed in Japanese American actresses into Google, and I didn't recognize any of the names offhand, I feel like the major point is we need to just, bring people to the forefront. And then, if there had been somebody that could have been cast that's Scarlett Johansson level, that was a Japanese American, we should have put her in there. But I understand why filmmakers say, like, hey, we need a draw for this movie. It is an American or a co-Japanese American production, and this person's a draw, and she has made movies like this before with Lucy. She can handle the action. So I feel like culturally it was the wrong decision, but for the movie, I enjoy Scarlett Johansson as the major.
I'll say this about the whole thing, and this is something I wish we could see in society more, is I feel that in this case, they weren't entering into a bad faith argument. I think there was some effort made, as you pointed out, to bring a more international cast. To Rodney's point, I think a wiser way to sidestep the whole thing would have just to have said, this is an American adaptation, we're going to set it in America, still have a diverse cast, but that way you can have a American lead and it's not weird. But, I just think that their intentions were good. I don't feel that this was some kind of brazen whitewashing where they just didn't care about any of the cultural aspects of the film. I mean, I think it's pretty clear in the film they care about the cultural heritage of the story. So in this case, I feel it was in good faith, and I understand that they had to cast a bankable American lead if they wanted it to do well in America. I think it was a victim of poor timing because I think it was something that was really largely in the cultural conversation and still is largely in the cultural conversation. And for good reason. It's a conversation that needs to be there and it's something we should care about. I do feel like this movie shouldered unfairly the brunt of the negative aspect of that conversation. And that's too bad. It didn't really totally deserve it. But I do understand at the same time why it happened.
I think it's just like it's a very unique case. Like there are many other examples of like whitewashing that are clear cut, right?
Right.
But in this one, you can't be like, well, we need to find an actual woman who's a robot, right, to play the part. Like that's not an option. And you're right. Like bring me the most famous Japanese actress available, and she'll still be unknown to American audiences, and that's troubling, you know. So
you have to fix the whole system before you can fix this problem. You know what I mean? It's like, let's get more Japanese actresses opportunities. And then in the future, if something like this comes up again, we're in a better position to do the right thing. Right. But,
agreed.
You know, we weren't there in 2017. And frankly, we're not there now either. Okay, so let's move on to the 2017 adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. We open up the film with a whole bunch of corporate logos because now every movie that's expensive has to have about 20 different production companies involved. But we get our sort of obligatory few paragraphs of text explaining the situation in the world and what's going to happen. I appreciated this chunk of text because it was really to the point and I think pretty effective. We learned that in the future, people are basically becoming more and more combined with their technology, aka cyborgs. Let's just agree to use the word cyborg so we don't have to keep calling it something else. Basically, people are becoming more cyborgs, which we are in real life. And there's a corporation called Hanka. They're a robotics corporation and they're funded by the government.
Wait a minute, it's Pfizer and Moderna? Is that what you're saying?
Pfizer Robotics.
But they're developing a military operative that will combine a human brain with a synthetic body.
They tell you what you need to know, right? Like, I never hold it against a movie if you're going to put words on the screen at the beginning. Like, all right, just tell me what I need to know. All right, there's the robot company. They're making people robotic. Okay, I get it.
The three of us have discussed now several of these types of movies. Mm-hmm. And particularly the last one we all got together for was an anime adaptation. I just appreciated the brevity and succinctness of this. I was like, oh, very good. I get it.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Honestly, there's a line in the anime which has a similar sort of opening with a bunch of text, and they say that, you know, technology is, you know, infiltrated human society so much, but not to the point yet that races and nations are erased. And I almost felt like, you know what? If you're going to cast Scarlett Johansson, why don't you just say nations and ethnicities are erased? And I feel like that almost was like, this was like right in front of you guys. Like, but I guess, you know, that would have been changing it. But it was an interesting, you know, little tidbit that I felt like they could have easily moved forward because they basically said, like, we're almost there, but not quite yet. And so why didn't the movie just go that extra mile?
So yeah, our opening visual sequence, what we see is the Major's operation becoming a disembodied human brain into a cyborg body. And we see these sort of red-garbed surgeons, which I thought looked pretty cool. And we actually see the brain being put into the body, and these synthetic nerve endings are reaching up to connect with the brain. And the body is processed and sort of put through this milk bath, and then the milk bath dries, and the milky coating falls away like paper. Awesome. And we see her robotic body, which is pretty cool design, and then we get a very stylized logo, which is pretty much the same as the anime, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. With the triangle, and yes, it's very close. Yeah,
the whole opening credit sequence feels very much I'm going to use the word copied, but in a good way, copied from the anime. Like it's like almost shot for shot.
Yeah, it's very faithful.
Can I tell you one thing that bugs the fucking shit out of me? It shows the title twice. Why? Did either of you notice that?
No.
Yeah, dude. Go back and watch it. It shows her laying there, like, being assembled or whatever, and then like in standard like white font, like where it says Scarlett Johansson, that fades away, and in the same font it says Ghost in the Shell. And then you see the credit sequence where she like, the paper and shit falls off her, and then it goes to like the big triangle logo that says Ghost in the Shell. And I feel like some editor forgot to take it out. And literally, they screened it for 100 different times, and no one ever noticed.
That's strange. Yeah, I didn't notice it.
Go back and watch. Tell me I'm crazy.
There might be some legal situation there where they had to put it in front. I don't know, maybe.
You got to put the title in twice in case people are confused. What if someone comes in late because they were getting popcorn, and they're like, wait, what movie is this? It's like how radio stations have to say the name of the station every hour.
Well, no. You know how like people, get named ahead of the title or something like that. Like I'm saying that there's some legal thing where it's like, oh, the title has to be before any other credits or something like that. That might have been the case, but I agree. It should have just been the last one.
Along with that triangular logo, we get our first real glimpse of Scarlett Johansson as this character. We see the character a lot in basically what is almost a nude setting. She's a robot, so her body, it's not naked. You don't see naked flesh, but it pretty much looks like naked flesh a lot of the time. And it's very...
titillating?
It's pretty titillating, yeah. I mean, for a sort of mainstream sci-fi movie where your character is basically a superhero, it's a little risque, I guess, to present her in a way that she's almost naked when she's kicking ass.
I was watching the trailer for this in the theater with a male friend of mine, and when she takes off that first coat and reveals the bodysuit, there was an audible whoa from him. So that just tells you everything you need to know. I mean, like it's definitely out there. But I will say that in the anime, it's way pervier. Like there's way more like erect nipples all over this place, and like after I watched the anime and then the live action afterwards, and the live action seems very tame and way less pervy by the standards of the anime. So
our hero character of Major wakes up in a recovery room, and she's speaking to Dr. Ouellette. I can never pronounce this name. It's a really hard to pronounce.
I think you say it like that.
Ouellette. And this character is played by the great French actress Juliette Binoche. And she explains to Major that her body was killed, but her brain was preserved and put into this artificial body. And so now she is a ghost in the shell. So we get the title of the movie pretty much right away. A third time, if you will. And we see that the head of the company that's financing all of this, the Honka company, the head of the company is named Cutter, the CEO. But he sees Major not as a human being, but as a machine, as an asset or whatever. So pretty much right away we know this is probably not going to be a good guy. Now, Chris, is this accurate to the anime?
Not really. I feel like there's another sector of the Japanese government that comes in and wants her. This is like the simplified version, and actually to me works a little better.
I mean, I don't recall, even though I just watched the anime, I don't recall, like, there's no Mr. Cutter to my memory, right?
I feel like he wasn't named Mr. Cutter, but there's like sort of an American ambassador in Section 6, and they're in Section 9, and Sector 6 is this, they're the bad guys.
For most of the episode, I'm going to try to just talk about the live action film as its own thing, right? Because if we just keep comparing it to the anime, that gets complicated. But in terms of the live action film, I have no problem with his opening, right? Like it sets up the stage. She wakes up and she's like, hey, I'm in a different body. Why can't, like she, I thought Scarlett Johansson sells it here. She's like, why can't I feel my body? I got to tell you, Mr. Cutter is terrible, is a little strong, but like he is such a mustache twirling villain. His name's literally Cutter. Come on, fuck off, go away.
Yeah, the actor is also poor man's Liam Neeson.
Dude, I gotta tell you, I had the same problem both times I watched this movie. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and I watched it earlier today. You meet him in the opening scene, but then he shows up way later, and in both times, I totally forgot who he was.
Yeah.
And I was like, who's this guy? And then I was like, oh wait, was he at the beginning of the movie? That's never a good sign.
This villain sucks. For me, this is really the worst part of the movie, honestly.
Sure, yeah.
This is not a compelling villain. This sort of corporate bad guy is something we've seen a million times. Such a boring sci-fi bad guy type of villain. No offense to the actor. I'm sure he's a fine actor in whatever country he comes from, but yeah, this villain just sucks. I'm not compelled by him at all.
You know, there are two really big problems. One, they don't give him a scene, you know, like whatever, in a boardroom where where we see his point of view, where he's like, I'm trying to make the world better by making robot soldiers or whatever. And two, he never has a single fucking scene with the Major.
That's true.
He's the villain of the movie, but he doesn't interact with her one time.
He interacts
Except
with
when
her.
he tries to kill her with a tank.
Right.
But he's not there. They've never actually physically spoken. So
It's about technology and the distance between human beings, bro.
Oh shit, you're right. It's so deep. I still can't understand it all these years later.
So we cut to 1 year later, and now Major is working for basically some sort of special ops police department or whatever called Section 9. And we're in this Blade Runner version of Tokyo. It's like Blade Runner times 1,000.
Yeah.
There's neon everywhere.
Hell yeah.
There's holograms everywhere. Visually, it definitely feels just like it's kind of just doing Blade Runner times 1,000,000. But I gotta say, it's doing it well.
Hell yeah. It's awesome. If this is your jam, it's hitting the spot. For me, it's just like, you know, if you like ice cream, this is the best you'll ever get, you know.
I'm not going to say it's the best you're ever going to get, but it looks awesome. I have to agree, from the minute the movie starts till it ends, visually, it's great.
Yeah.
If you do drugs, this movie's for you.
We get these great cityscapes of the city, and we're seeing all these cool holograms and everything. And Major is standing on a rooftop reporting to her superior, Aramaki, who is played by the great Japanese director Katashi Beat Kitano. And she is monitoring this basically sushi dinner that's going on in this building. They have found out that there's some sort of like device on the roof that's spying on this meeting, so they know something's going wrong. And at this dinner is a character called Dr. Osment, who's played by an actor I love and wish would be in more things, Michael Wincott. I was a big fan of him in the 90s. I love him in Strange Days. I love him in The Crow. I love him in The Doors. I love him in Alien Resurrection even.
Yeah.
Robin Hood.
Honestly, they should have swapped the villain with him. You know, they should have swapped those two actors right there, and you would have had a much better movie.
The minute you meet that guy, you're like, oh, that's the bad guy. No, that guy, he's only in this one scene, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's disappointing that he's only in this one scene. But he's trying to get this deal to go down, and he's having this conversation with this other guy who's raising sort of ethical concerns about what Hanka is doing. But then these cyborg type, like Yakuza-y dudes come in with these visors, and they start messing shit up with their guns and stuff. But then what happens is the geisha robots that are serving everybody, they suddenly become hacked by this outside force. They're like grabbing people and dragging them back and then porting into the back of their heads, I guess, to rob data out of them. So Major gets wind of this, and so she does the thing where she falls backwards and falls off the top of this building to go break into this sushi bar and save these people from being attacked. Now, this whole sequence was really highlighted in the trailers. Like a lot of this was in the trailers. And I think that some of the best visual candy that the movie has to offer is in this 10-minute sequence.
Agreed.
These geisha bots are fucking cool.
Yeah, and they're physical. Yeah, and they're not bullshit CG, you know, like they have this physicality to them that looks really good. And then when there is CG, it's incorporated really well. And a lot of this is just faithfully rendering the anime.
Right, but why wouldn't you?
Yeah. No, that's a compliment.
That's why they show all this in the trailer, because it's the best part of the movie.
Yeah, it is the best part of the movie. Like, the movie never really gets better than this scene, because Scarlett comes crashing in through a window, guns blazing. She's like running around the room because, she's a cyborg, so she can run on walls, and she's firing at the robots and at the Yakuza Devo. I don't even know what they're supposed to be, guys. And it's just a really cool action scene, and it's really visually exciting in a way that, for instance, Aeon Flux could not pull off.
Yeah, exactly. This action kicks ass compared to Aeon Flux, which was definitely going for this but not delivering.
And no, look, it's not, is it reinventing the wheel? Is it the next Matrix? No, but it's still pretty fucking great. Like, this segment of film, I feel, is better than most superhero movies. Like, if we're looking at this as a superhero movie, which it basically is, and that's especially apparent at the end, this sequence, I think, is just stellar.
Yeah.
Like, it's stellar. It's great. And I think Scarlett is really pulling it off, the physicality of it. I feel like the cuts and the editing and the action is all really kinetic and good, and the production design is just out of sight.
The shot of her actually like breaking through the glass where you can actually see her form in the glass, I feel like there were two different renderings of that. Like, for the marketing, you could actually see her more solidly so that, it came across in the marketing, but then in the movie, she was even less there, and it was really just outlined by the shards of glass that she was pushing through, which was even cooler, because I remember, there was a lot of marketing for this, and everyone saw that scene over and over and over again, and you were like, okay, they got it right. But then I remember watching it in the theater for that first time, and she is really just not there, and it's the glass that's silhouetting her whole thing, and I was like, man, now that they even pushed it further, I love it.
I'm going to have one note that I'm going to have a bunch of notes, but one of the notes you will hear me say throughout is that while this movie has a lot of cool parts, none of them are truly fucking awesome. I don't think, like, compare this to the opening of The Matrix, which is fucking awesome. That is a cool sequence.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think this is awesome.
Yeah.
This part is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of the combination of, like, the geisha robots and the design and the fact that Scarlett Johansson looks friggin' great. Honestly, if we're comparing this to the beginning of The Matrix, this is better than that.
No,
that opening scene on the rooftop.
That's fucking
it's not
awesome,
that
dude.
great.
The part where she
fine.
where she beats up all the cops and she floats in the air.
Cool.
Right?
It's a great opening, but it's not the best part of The Matrix. The Matrix gets better as it goes. It's a great opening. It doesn't blow its wad like this movie kind of does. But this scene is awesome.
This opening scene is cool, and it's the best part of the movie. I stand by that. And the geisha robot is fucking amazing. Let's make a whole movie about the geisha robots. They look so cool. And I'll say it one more time. This movie should have probably been nominated for Best Production Design. Like, it looks gorgeous in every fucking shot. I just think this opening action scene is kind of short, actually. She jumps through the window, she shoots a couple dudes, and then she shoots the robot. And it's not really an action movie, but that's part of my main complaint here is that there is action in it, but there are not really actions, like big action set pieces.
I'll take short and sweet over prolonged and annoyingly obnoxiously long.
No, man, give me like 6 Underground, where the first 20 minutes is just a car chase. That's what I want.
But that's Michael Bay. I can't watch that.
Yeah.
So the way this scene wraps up is one of the geisha robots is thrashing around on the floor, and it starts begging for its life, which really throws off Major, who is mostly a robot herself. So she's supposed to just cap this geisha, but she can't, because now the thing's begging for its life. And then it stops begging for its life, and it says, "Collaborate with Hanka robots and be destroyed," which is a warning that we're going to hear several times throughout the movie. Then she realizes that the robot's just been hacked or whatever, and she kills it. But I thought it was a good little button for the end of the scene. Yeah. And it gives us a little window into her inner struggle, this person who is having a problem accepting the fact that they're mostly a robot at this point. Scarlett Johansson's performance in this is kind of a mixed bag. I'm not going to say it's bad because I think she's doing something very intentional and she's really trying to do something with this performance. Especially if you watch it a few times, you see like she's trying to act like a robot that has a human brain. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really hard thing to pull off. And I think that's a really hard thing for an audience to relate to. And one of my central problems with this movie is there's an emotional disconnect where you have a tough time investing yourself in the character of Major, and it's because she can't behave like a full human being with a wide range of emotional reactions, and I just think that's a really hard thing to pull off. So on one hand, I really appreciate what she's trying to do, but on the other hand, I don't feel myself feeling a lot for her, you know?
Right. For me, the original anime is even colder and has less human warmth in it than this movie. And to me, the human warmth crept up on me surprisingly because I wasn't expecting it at all. And then by the end of the movie, I was pleasantly surprised. And I think Scarlett's performance is largely due to that. I think I was buying what she was selling, and I thought she did a good job in this performance, and it was a very tricky line to walk, as you were saying, and I think she did a good job.
Oh my God, I think she's mostly terrible, and I like Scarlett Johansson. There are a couple scenes where I was like, oh hey, she's actually acting here, and like I feel like she's. Let me rephrase. I know that she's acting throughout, right? But there are a couple scenes where I feel like she is an actual like human brain, like a person, a character, whatever you want to say.
A ghost.
But here's the problem, and this is a problem with the entire thinking behind the film. She is a human being. They put her human brain in a robot body. So she should have normal human ways of speaking. Her reactions should be human. Like, that's the problem. She shouldn't be... Like, if they were going the way the anime went, it makes sense that she's like a cold, distant AI person robot thing. But there are all these scenes where she's like playing it like this monotone character, and that makes no sense based on the plot they set up.
What are you talking about? The whole point is the more we rely on technology, the less human we become. And if the only thing in your body is your brain and maybe your ghost... That's the whole point of the movie, is that's why she's acting robotic.
That's everything that you are. Everything you feel and experience is your brain. And if you want to...
Well, no, people say that when they've had, after heart transplants, they're like, oh my God, I actually feel like, it affects my emotional well-being and this and that. And who's to say that just our brain is what we are? And I feel like that is a question that this movie is positing.
Not only that, I think that it's made sort of clear in the movie that her memories have all been wiped out. So, and the character says at several points, like, are we just collections of our memories? So I think what they're trying to get at is, yes, she's behaving robotically because the whole human being that she was has been erased. Like, her brain is basically being just used as a biological function. There's none of her personality still in there. I think you would have a point, Rodney, if they had just kept her personality, because your personality is your personality, and it's all built from memories and who you were and who you've learned, what you've learned and everything. So if you take that all away, you don't have a personality anymore.
You make a good point. All right. I will back down a little bit, but that doesn't change the fact that she's really not very good in this movie. People don't like her in this movie. People didn't go see this movie. People hate this fucking movie and they hate her performance. And I'm not wrong to say that. She's really bad in it, except when she goes like scuba diving. And at the beginning when she wakes up and she goes, I can't feel my body. And I was like, oh, that's a good scene.
Rodney, if you're going to use the
I'm right.
defense
I'm totally right.
that people didn't see the movie, so it's bad, then like you can level that at everything that we ever cover here.
I know it's an easy way out.
If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus says, despite a strong central performance by Scarlett Johansson, the movie flounders. So
you're telling me you're watching this movie and you genuinely like this character?
No, I'm agreeing with you. But I don't think that it's because her performance performance is bad. I think it's because it's a really hard thing to do.
Right.
It's a really hard needle to thread,
Yes.
to be asked to be like, hey, you're going to play a character who was a human being, but then they took away all her memories and put her in a robot body. So you're kind of a robot and you're kind of a person. I don't know how you play that. How do you play that? What would be your solution as to how to play that? You know, like it's hard.
Cast Sean Young.
You're right.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty much anybody who ever plays a robot other than Arnold Schwarzenegger is told they're terrible at playing a robot. You're right. On one hand, I don't really feel a lot for this character, as I said, but on the other hand, I appreciate that Scarlett Johansson is trying to do something.
She could have phoned this in easily and been even worse, you know, and I think she's actually giving it the good old college try and to me succeeds.
Oh, and one thing that's going on with the Major is she's having these glitches where she is seeing things, basically, these digital images that flicker in her vision. It's supposedly a normal thing, and when she goes to the doctor to have a checkup, the doctor explains to her, oh, these aren't a big deal, but, you know, really we know that this has got to be indicative of some important plot point that is to emerge in the future.
She sees a cat in her apartment.
And then it like disappears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, which sort of reminiscent of the Matrix. Isn't there a glitch cat in the Matrix?
Right. Well,
too?
he sees it twice, and that's when they reset it.
Here we meet her partner Bateau, who is played by Pilu Asbeek, who is mostly known for playing a jerk on Game of Thrones for the last few seasons.
Yeah, the pirate guy or whatever.
The uncle, right? The Iron Islands uncle.
He's got a real presence about him, but it's more of a villain presence. Like, they should have put this guy in the villain role, although he's pretty good in this role. Yeah, he's got sort of blonde hair, and he's her pal. You know, she's feeling sort of sensitive about her inhuman status, and so she relates to him about stuff. And he has this habit of feeding the local dogs. It's kind of a very save the cat sort of thing.
It is, but I love it. I'm feeling this warmth as opposed to the anime, you know, like, you know, I'm an animal lover, so I'm a sucker for this, which it's totally working on me. Like, oh, there's a cute cat, there's cute dogs. It's like, I'm all there for it. I'm lapping it up.
I mostly like this guy and his performance. Again, it's not a character I completely 100% love or anything like that, but he's a striking visual presence and the actor is good, so I think he's fine.
He's actually my favorite actor in the movie. I just really like his performance in this. Like, I think he's a normal human being, right? When the movie starts, like he doesn't have any cybernetic. Well, actually, no, he has like some kind of chip that lets him communicate telepathically.
Yeah, I think everybody's got something.
Right. But he has no
not the Chinese guy. He's all pure, he says. So,
but I don't know. I remember when I first saw this movie, I like this guy, and maybe it's because he fed the dogs. I think he's got some good line deliveries. I think he makes a good partner, you know. And they did a really good job of making him look like the dude in the anime.
totally. Yeah, and I think it's a cool thing that, like, you know, they're buddy cops, male and female, and there's no real sexual tension among them. It's just they're really just buddies, and I buy that. And, you know, I like the way he admires her. He's like, oh, it's better to be you, pure and, you know, unadulterated with your stupid memories. And I dug all that. You know, I could watch a whole movie of the two of them just shooting the shit and drinking beer.
Yeah, I agree.
So they have to go investigate what happened with the geisha. They have to get some sort of information out of her. So they go to Hanka and they are greeted by this cyborg mortician or something named Dr. Dallin, and she hasn't found anything on the geisha's drive. So what Major has to do is she has to do what's called a deep dive into the geisha's mind, sort of port her own consciousness into whatever's like lingering in this geisha's drive. And while she's in there, she catches glances of the villain, who's this sort of hooded character, but then he sort of pushes her away in the vision and she's being hacked into, and so they have to pull her out. But this, it gives her the information as to where this villain Kuze is because she sees where he is in this vision.
And she goes into like the digital sunken place.
There's a shot of her sort of falling into water that's very reminiscent of the sunken place in Get Out. I was hoping it might have been a little bit visually more interesting. Once she gets in there, it's just sort of like these digitally looking images that she sees, but it serves the purpose and it moves the plot along. And now they've got a place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys are going to get all upset, but like, look, like visually, it's awesome. I love when she's like down there and like, you know, in the memory stream, and people are like digitally glitching, and all those like black burned people are like trying to hold her down. Like, that's all cool, right? It's cool. But it also just like doesn't make any fucking sense. Okay. Like, it just really bugs me that like she walks in and she's like, yo, did you figure out how to hack that robot? Like, nope. And like, okay, I guess I gotta plug in, and like that's actually super dangerous. Like, they don't have like, it's like so futuristic that they don't have any other way to like get the info other than she has to like jack her consciousness in. And then she's just like, I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. And they're like, okay, go ahead. You can do that. Even though you cost like $1 billion. It's happening because the movie needs it to happen so we can move along. Okay, I get it. But that didn't stop me from hating it.
Well, no, it's not happening because the movie needs it to happen. It's happening because the movie wants to do something cool with the fact that they've got a character that's a brain in a robot body. What kind of doesn't make sense is that she's not a digital consciousness. She's a physical consciousness. Right. So why should she be able to go into a digital consciousness with her mind? That's the part of it that I struggle with.
Yeah, in the anime, she hooks into a lot more things. You know, she can like, you know, hook into somebody's car and take over and do this and that, which is a little bit, which makes a little bit more sense, I guess, is that like, you know, everybody sort of can meld their consciousness into the internet or into other, you know, digital things. But, you know, I agree. That's kind of like, you know, it's a thing that you just kind of have to go with and be like, oh, in this world, this is how it's done. But I guess it doesn't make, you know, perfect scientific sense.
I mean, the person who was operating on the geisha could have just found some kind of video file or whatever and showed it to them. But they want to do this because it's cool. It's a cool idea. I hear what you're saying, Rodney, but they're doing it because it's a cool thing to do with your superhero character. You know, you don't want Batman to just do things in a normal, boring way. You want them to do it in a cool way.
Are you kidding me? Batman spends half of each movie sitting in front of like a bank of TV screens scrubbing through videos.
Well, maybe Batman's the wrong thing. But like Iron Man, you know, you don't want to see Iron Man take the subway. It's boring. You want to see them do something cool.
Yeah, again, it's not a big deal. Like, whatever. It's just like, it's a fucking movie, man. Like, she goes deep diving. Okay, great. Now we see the bad guy. I get it. Well, like, they make a big point of how dangerous it is, but there's really no like repercussions of it. Unless I'm supposed to understand that like she's now permanently connected to Kuze.
That was my understanding. Yeah.
That is what I think it is. Yeah, now he has access to her, and now he can kind of fuck with her through her brain. He's hacked into her,
Sure,
basically.
I'll buy that.
Or he's put a virus into her or whatever.
Can I also just bring up Scarlett Johansson's walk, which is one in my notes here, like the way she walks. Like, I saw it with a friend of mine, and he just couldn't get over, like, bringing it back to her performance. He could not get over the way she walked because it's so just like weirdly robotic and butch, and she just has this like sort of weird determination with the way she walks. I don't know if any of you guys picked up on that, but that really bugged my friend, and now every time I watch it, I'm just like, oh, there's the walk, there's the Ghost in the Shell walk.
I feel like she kind of has that in everything, though.
It's way exaggerated in this. You gotta watch it again. Man. She's it's crazy, and I'm like, kudos to Scarlett for going for it.
Perhaps an odd choice. An odd physical choice. I just noticed that she kind of has a weird walk in general, like even in the Avengers and stuff. Okay. I mean, I think it's exaggerated to your friend's point in this, but I think she just kind of has a strange walk. So what happens here, she figures out that Kuze has been hanging out in this strip club, basically, in the basement of this strip club. So, you know, it's not a sci-fi movie if we don't get a bar or club scene. It's a Yakuza bar is what it is. So she goes in there, she's sort of plain clothes. She goes in while Batu is just kind of hanging out in the bar, and she gains access to these Yakuza dudes, one of whom is just really slimy. He's literally slimy. He's like super sweaty, and they bring her into this room where there's a stripper pole.
That guy's actually, he's a Malaysian musician, producer, and art house actor.
Oh, nice.
He does a really good job, I feel like. He's extra creepy.
He plays a really good creep.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And one thing that gets established here, which was something that I really liked, is because everybody's got these cybernetic implants, they can switch to mind comms, which is basically they don't have to talk. They can just hear each other's thoughts. So we're getting this back and forth dialogue between Major and Batu communicating over their brains.
I love it. I love all that.
Yeah.
And they lose contact with each other at one point, which complicates things. So she's in this room with these Yakuza guys, and they're threatening her. And so she basically kicks the crap out of them while using the stripper pole, which is, pretty good. I mean, I think considering that she's kicking dudes' asses with a stripper pole, it's really not that exploitive. She's just really using it really effectively to kick their ass. Meanwhile, Batu's getting into a firefight in the main club with a bunch of guys, so it turns into a big firefight. And Major runs off into the basement because she's sort of following this glitch of Yakuza. And she ends up in this room wired with explosives, and then they blow up, and Batu gets his eyes burned out.
One of my favorite moments is when the creepy guy, she does her flip and says one of a pretty cool line, like, I wasn't built to dance, and she kicks two guys, like flips backwards and then kicks two guys in the face, which is pretty awesome. Like it's very Matrix-like. But the creepy guy, even after that, is still laughing. Yeah. He's laughing the whole time, and then she has to kick him out of the room. And like you said, I really enjoy the use of the pole to take out these creeps. And I thought that was a really, cool sort of reversal of the pole dance.
I'm not trying to be this guy, but
But aren't you?
I am that guy. Dude, look, I'm a smart guy. I pay attention. I've seen a lot of movies. I'm watching this movie. She goes into this bar. She walks in, and the first thing that happens is this sweaty Yakuza dude is come with me, and he drags her into the back room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is this happening? What? You tell me. You all watch the movie.
Because she was asking to get modified or something like that, and that's apparently a no-no there. And so they're like, wait a minute, why is this person who might be a cyborg already asking, it's like, oh, if you ask for heroin at the wrong place, and they're like, this person's trouble. I'm like,
right, if you walked into a mob bar and you were like, hey, I'm here to join the mafia, can anybody hook me up? I'd like to become a made person.
Yeah, okay, all right. I don't know, it's just
Look, I'm not disagreeing. I thought it was a little too convenient that they just were like, okay, well then come in this room. What should happen is they should be like, get the fuck out of here. And
yeah,
throw
exactly.
her out.
Oh, you asked for heroin? Well, I'm going to take you in the back room and beat the shit out of you, right? It would just make more sense if they're like, yeah, we do fucking mods. Come in this back room and we'll talk in private. It's just a weird scene. They handcuff her to his pole and they're shocking her. And yeah, the sweaty dude is hilarious, but I don't know. I'm just sitting there why is this happening? Why do if you just cut that out of the movie, it doesn't actually change anything.
It makes it less cool.
You're right. It does. You've now removed an action scene. That's why it's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they just want to give you a taste of the world and the, skeezy underworld that's there and stuff. But, it's sort of typical of a cop movie. They always, I just recently watched 48 Hours. They have to go into a bar and have a bar scene where they get into, it's just that sort of cop movie standard thing that happens. We got to go find out. We got to go get information. Let's go to this underworld bar where all these lowlifes hang out and figure out what's going on. It's a cop trope.
And everyone knows if you want to make a movie that people love, you should just rely on tropes and do what's standard in all of those types of films.
Well, what great movie that you love that's a $1 billion movie doesn't rely on tropes? Please tell me which one.
I can't.
What's that groundbreaking movie that relies on zero tropes that's made $1 billion?
Avatar. Come
fuck off.
He brought it up, not me.
Completely original.
First of all, Chris is the one that gets to bring up Avatar every single podcast. Second of all, Avatar is the most unoriginal movie, trope-laden.
You couldn't come up with unobtainium. That's fucking genius.
Well, I'm glad we got our Avatar reference in. Thank God.
Look.
I was wondering when that was going to happen.
I'm being nitpicky. I understand, right? But it's also just like there's a better version of this bar scene. That's what I'm getting at. There's a better way for this to go down, except
I totally
Rupert
agree.
Evans or whatever the director is, Rupert Murdoch, who directed this? Rupert Sanders, right?
Rupert Murdoch. Whoa.
It's like, look, he hired a really good DP and a really good production designer, but he's not a very good director. I'm sorry, Rupert, if you're listening. I've seen several of your films now. They're not good. You're not very good.
Well, it's the writing. It's not really him.
It's both.
He should, kick it back to the writer's room, I suppose. But I feel like this movie is not concerned with those types of details, I mean, just go with it.
I think it's concerned enough with them for
exactly.
them to make sense. It's not Aeon Flux bad.
No, I agree.
The story is told in a succinct enough way. There's nothing coming up here that I feel is egregiously stupid or is asking me to go to suspend my disbelief too far.
Yeah.
I feel like these are all reasonable, if not the most outstanding and clever story choices you could come up with. They're fine. They're doing the job, and I don't feel like it's stupid. But yeah, so the main thing that happens here is that the place explodes and Batu gets his eyes burned out. So now he's going to have these fancy new eyes that can do all these things, and but he still needs Major to feed the dogs for him. So she, has to, because he's afraid that the dogs are going to get too creeped out by his crazy new eyes. So she has to go feed the dogs. And so we get a nice little moment where Major feeds the dogs and sort of we sense that she's trying to access some part of her humanity by doing this.
I dig his eyes. I think his eyes are awesome.
Yeah, they did a really good job. I was glad that they didn't just use CG and it was some kind of like practical mix or something of it, but it looked really good.
But I mean, this sort of opens up this idea that Major is trying to, as I said, access some part of her humanity. She then goes to a prostitute. This scene I struggled with a little bit. I know what they were trying to get at here, obviously. She goes to this prostitute who's got an inexplicable face covering over part of her face. And I thought it was that she was a cyborg, but then they go back to a room and Major just wants to sort of touch her face and feel her skin, and she pulls off the decal or whatever that was on her face. I'm sure it's some world building thing, like all prostitutes have to have plastic over the lower half of their face. But so many characters in this movie have parts of their faces come out, like at least 3 characters. Like, I didn't mention this, but the doctor who's the geisha doctor has eyes that come out, and it's sort of a recurring visual motif. So I'm like, why does the prostitute have plastic on her face, but she's not a cyborg?
There are a lot of parts in the movies where someone's face just kind of like opens up and it's like a machine. And that looks awesome. Like that when the geisha doctor's eyes come out, so cool. With the prostitute, I was like, does she just have saran wrap on her face? Like, I don't understand what that is.
It was a moment where I feel like the world building kind of got in the way. Like, just have the prostitute be a normal person so we understand that she's looking to touch a normal person because she's trying to reach for her humanity, so to speak.
This scene is so dumb. It's so dumb. They should have cut it out. It has no purpose. I understand it.
They're trying.
I know what they're trying to do.
The purpose is they're trying to, she's searching for her humanity, but yes, I agree. It's not,
all those scenes that end up on the cutting room floor with all movies, those are scenes where they tried something. And then the editor said, this doesn't work. Let's get rid of it. That's what they should have done here.
Whether it works or not, I enjoy the scene.
Is there anything you don't like? Oh my God. You like she's sitting there touching her lips being like, what do you feel? And she's like, it feels different. Like, what the fuck? The character never even comes back. This has no purpose.
Yeah, kind of with Rodney on this one.
It could easily have been cut out, yeah.
But the next thing we learn that's important is that Dr. Dahlin is killed by Kuze, and he takes her cyborg eyes, which I just was talking about. And we find out that Dahlin had learned about a project called 2571 that Hanka was involved with. And that Kuze is targeting everyone on this list, and Ule is on this list as well. This is fine. This is, sort of a standard kind of plot thing. We're learning why the villain is doing what the villain is doing, but it's also, at this point, I know exactly what's going on. I'm like, okay, so he was part of a project. This was the project. He's getting revenge on everybody in the project. It is very reminiscent of V for Vendetta. That's basically the same exact motivation for the character of V. Spoiler for V for Vendetta. So it was a plot point that I was familiar with. So as soon as I find out there's this project and that he's killing off people from the project, I pretty much know what's going on. So the fact that they're kind of trying to tease it out is just kind of a shrug.
The numbers in the anime are 2501, and then at the end of the movie, it evolves to 25017. So I thought it was interesting that they mixed it up into 2571 for this, and the screenwriters definitely did their nerd homework.
But they were like, we don't want that zero in there.
Exactly, no zeros.
Zeros don't play well in the Midwest.
Rodney, since you seem to have a violent reaction to the idea that the character of Kuze was a decent villain, why don't you give us your rationale for why he's not a good villain?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things. One, I think like his voice modulate, like the way he talks, it's like a combination of like his like weird digital stutter with that like deep like digital baritone layer.
The Max Headroom.
Yeah, he sounds like Matt. Is it Headroom?
Headroom. It's like, well, it's a thing that says Max Headroom. So yes, you could say that, but people pronounce it Max Headroom.
He's like, Major, let me tell you why we like that shit. And I just think one makes him sound like, I get that he's like broken, but it doesn't really make him very scary. And it's hard to understand him when he talks, which is, again, maybe you want to blame my speakers, but like there's that. And he just, I don't know, like he's lame. He doesn't do anything in the movie. He just like limps around like with a shawl and like occasionally hooks his brain into shit. I don't know. He's lame. There's no kids dressing up like Kuze from the Ghost in the Shell film being like, oh man, who are you? I love your outfit. Oh, I'm the villain from Ghost in the Shell live action movie.
By your estimation, anything that kids dress up as is a good character.
Successful. Yes.
No,
that's
dude,
the bar.
Look, it's like, I know you're trying to like find some shading here for your podcast, right? But like, he's a lame villain. He is. You're not watching the movie being like, oh man, I want more.
He's not a villain.
He's not a villain.
And hence the problem with the film, right? He is portrayed as a villain, right? When we first meet him.
He's an antagonist.
Okay,
yes.
Sure. Like, look, I like his backstory later. Like, it's kind of interesting. I just don't care. I'm sorry, I don't. Like, I think it's kind of lame.
I'll split the difference. I think there's things about the character that are cool. I like Michael Pitt as an actor generally. I think he's a pretty good actor. He's the one who plays Kuze. I like some of the design when we finally sort of see him and see that he's this robot that's sort of falling apart. But at the same time, yeah, I don't think he's not built up into a great villain. I think he's a pretty cool character. I think there's a lot of potential for the character that isn't really realized in the movie.
Right. And look, this is my understanding is that like that character comes from one of the later Ghost in the Shell, I think the TV series called like Standalone Complex.
That makes
sense.
So
based on, here's my understanding. In the anime world, there is the puppeteer who is the main villain in the animated film, right?
Yes.
And Kuze is the main villain in the animated series. And in the live action film, they've combined these two characters.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what they've done is they've kind of taken two individual cool characters and diluted them and tried to do two things with one. And I think that's why it doesn't work.
I think Michael Pitt does a decent job. I feel like he's trying to get that sort of broken, lost soul thing across. It doesn't always work. The Max Headroom thing is just kind of too dorky for me. All I could think of is you're doing a Max Headroom, and so it's a little bit too jokey and stutterish that it doesn't work for me. But I feel like the rest of him, like he does an admirable job. It almost makes me wish that he had played the sort of Tyrell character in Blade Runner 2049, because I think he kind of has like a better thing going than Jared Leto did.
Yeah.
But I agree that this, it was kind of weird, and the more I watch it, I kind of grow accustomed to him. But I remember on first viewing, I was like, this is kind of weird and not a home run for me. But I admire what he was trying to go for.
Yeah, I think Michael Pitt is a compelling actor, and I think there could have been something pretty great there, but I don't really think the movie allows it to happen.
And I will say that, as far as the casting goes, I think the puppet master, whether it is him or not, they specifically say in the anime that he was American. So give the movie a pass for casting Michael Pitt for this one.
Next, we get our next big action sequence, and the way this works is there are these garbage men that Kuze hacks into their brains, and they go and crash the car that Dr. Ulette is traveling in because she's the next target. And Major and her team shows up, and there's this big gunfight where they're gunfighting the garbage men who also now have weapons and stuff. And Major follows one of them to this flooded square, and he's got this jacket on that sort of is making him sort of invisible or whatever.
Thermal camouflage.
It's one of the Deathly Hallows.
So he's sort of glitching in and out of visibility. She follows him to this flooded square, but she can turn fully invisible. So she basically kicks his ass in this flooded square. This scene I remember specifically from the anime.
Yeah.
And I thought it was done pretty well here.
Yeah, it's super faithful, and it's one of the coolest parts for me, and especially in 3D with the water splashing everywhere. It looks so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool scene, and it's a lot of the props have to go to the original anime because they're really being faithful to it and just basically making it come to life in live action, and it's a cool scene.
I got to split the difference here, right? Because visually, again, every time I talk about the movie, I will say visually it's awesome. It's cool when they're fighting. Although I gotta say, how come no one's invisibility cloaks just work in the movie? They're always doing a glitchy thing, even Scarlett Johansson's. But here's my problem, all right? Why do these two garbage men, who are just doing their job, why do they have invisibility cloaks and submachine guns? It makes zero sense.
Well, I think they were given them by Kuze or something. They asked them where they got the weapons at one point. They don't know. Yeah, they don't know where they got them.
So Rodney, are you one of those guys that wonders where the Joker gets all his henchmen and all the rocket launchers that he uses and stuff like that? Is that
No. My issue here is that the way the movie portrays this scene, it portrays it that Kuze is I'm going to kill Dr. Ulette, whatever. I'm going to kill Juliette Binoche, right? And he realizes her car is driving down this freeway. So he's I'm going to hack into these two random garbage men and use their truck to crash into her car.
Yeah.
So is the implication that, how did he know she'd be there, right? Therefore, giving those guys guns and shit to have. And also, those guys, before they're hacked, they're just sitting there eating noodles. How come neither of them is hey, Bob, why do you have a machine gun in the cab? And he's yeah, I got a machine gun too. I don't remember putting this here. When you're watching the movie, you're yeah, it's just a movie. It's fun. But when you really think about it, it's sloppy writing. That doesn't make any sense.
But he could have hacked them years before and been plotting this whole thing.
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
There you go. It's just so arbitrary. I feel like you could make up anything.
Well, and yeah, you're coming, like Chris was saying, you're coming back to the whole Joker thing. In The Dark Knight, the Joker knows exactly where everybody's going all the time and is, ahead of everybody by 5 steps or whatever. So I get what you're saying, but it's a gimme that you just give to the villain that they know everything that's going on.
Yeah, and this villain is hooked into the entire internet network, so he would definitely know a lot of things and have his tendrils.
Sure,
so I feel like it makes more sense that he could set that up.
If in this day and age, if you told me that garbage men were carrying automatic weapons, I'd be of course they are. Of course they are.
There are a whole bunch of headcanon answers that I will accept that'll make me shut the fuck up, right? You can just tell me all garbage men have machine guns, or he's I don't know where she'll be, but I will hack every garbage man.
Yeah, maybe every garbage man in Tokyo was waiting for her to show up, and they all had guns because all garbage men carry guns in Tokyo in the future.
Sure, I'll buy that. But like, basically, the best parts of this movie are the parts that are lifted directly from the anime.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so when you finally get to like the cool fight in the shallow bay, I don't even know what that is, but it's cool.
I agree. The best parts of the movie are definitely lifted from the anime. And the best parts of the movie were really highlighted in the trailers. They knew they had something here. And yeah, they just basically filmed the anime. They used the anime as a storyboard. But it looks friggin' cool. And I'm not like a cartoon guy, so you give me something cool that happens in an anime and put it in live action, and I'm happy because I don't want to watch the anime because cartoons are for little babies.
Cartoon is
Cartoons are for piss pants babies, and I'm not going to watch them.
It's an offensive term, Sebastian.
Yeah.
It's an animated film, all right?
So they bring this one garbage man back to police headquarters, and they've got him in like an interrogation cube. And they're trying to ask him what's going on. Where did he get the machine guns? Whatever, to Rodney's point. But the dude clearly doesn't know anything because his brain has been hacked by Kuze. And he's got these false memories. He's got memories of a child that he doesn't have. So they realize, like, this guy isn't going to tell us anything. And then Kuze shows up in the guy's brain, and Major talks to him directly and demands to know who he is, and he gives her this sort of cryptic response, but they're able to trace the hack of the man's brain. But then Kuze makes the man kill himself.
You kind of skipped over the headline here, which is that in this future Tokyo, when you go to jail, they put you in a glass cube and they put like a padlock noose around your neck and make you just stand there. And no one has ever thought, hey, what if a prisoner tries to use that to kill themselves, as this guy does? It's like if they put you in a jail cell full of dynamite or something. It's the dumbest. I'm going to give this the award for the dumbest on-screen prison I've ever seen in any movie. And I'm counting the one where like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone are put in a glass IKEA cube.
Yeah, you have a point there.
Let's bring our suspect
Maybe
in.
giving your prisoners nooses in which to hang themselves is not the best policy decision.
So dumb. Commander, can you explain why 98% of all the prisoners hang themselves? No idea. I don't know. We bring them in, we handcuff them, we put them in the noose, we go get lunch. They're always hanging when we come back. I feel like Chris is stewing. Like he's just dying to tell me how cool this is.
I thought it was cool when he drops to his knees and kills himself. I was like, that's a cool button to the scene. But yeah, I mean, why would you have that in an interrogation room? But people kill themselves in prison all the time, and people give them, blankets. So it's not that crazy, but I see your point.
I'm going to admit that it didn't occur to me while I was watching it, and that I thought it was just kind of a cool prison
Exactly.
detail, but
You're just actively looking for reasons to not like the cool things. Like if I watched The Matrix and had to nitpick every single, like, that's cool, but it doesn't make sense if I think about it like a lot. Like, well, these are movies. So, like, you're depriving yourself of some cinematic pleasures, how I see it.
Explain to me one thing. What does that neck harness thing do? If you're going to put it in the movie, have a purpose.
Keep him in place, I guess. Like, so people can come into the cube and interrogate him, and then he can't come too close to them.
Yeah, it's like what they do to Hannibal Lecter when people want to go in this cell with him or whatever. I see your point, but there is a practical reason for the prison noose.
They usually have it length a little bit longer so they can't actually kill themselves, but then they had to pull it back because she went in there, and then that's why he was able to hang himself with it, because they rolled it back so that it was too tight. There you go.
Oh, I see.
That's what happened.
We've spent way too much time on the prison.
This is what I'm saying. Like, if you, like, this is your no prize, this is just like, all right, why did this happen? Now, are they going to spend half an hour explaining that in the movie? Probably not.
Rodney, I want to take a movie that you love.
Yeah, let's nitpick the shit out of it.
You did. It's called Lady in the Water. Tore it to fucking shreds. And then you had me come back.
You need to pick a movie for this show that you love that's like a sci-fi action movie.
Yeah, I'm sharpening my knives right here, man.
We'll put it under the Rodney magnifying glasses. and see what's what, because I feel like the sort of stuff that you pick apart happens in all movies that aren't 100% reality based. If you made a movie about reality, it's just going to be reality.
Yeah, why did the main character
boring.
get out of bed that day? No, he should have just stayed in bed the entire time. Like,
I agree, Chris. You got to explain that shit.
You have to give it a little leeway.
You
You have to let go of stuff.
Dude, I let go of stuff. All right, there's all kinds of shit in this movie that I didn't even bring up because I'm like, what? Like, well, yeah, whatever. They have machine guns, okay?
You did bring it up, Rodney.
I repeat it again. Like, unfortunately, there are times where people spend $100 million and they make a really visually cool thing, and then it comes out and everyone says, I don't like it. I just don't like it, right? And I'll point to, fucking the Wachowski space movie, Jupiter Ascending. Perfect example of a movie that, like, they spent a fuck ton of money on, and there are cool sequences in that movie. There's beautiful things to look at, but you know what? It's painful. It's painful to watch, right?
Oh, I know, and we're going to have to cover it on this podcast.
And is Ghost in the Shell painful? Not at all. But I think the problem is that it's just so bland. I find this movie just so flavorless, and yeah, it looks pretty, but like that's all it's got going on. In every moment of the movie, they're like, how do we make this stupid interrogation scene cool? Let's build a glass hollow cube and put him in that. And what if he's in like a weird noose like thing? Why? I don't know, because it will look cool because that's all I can offer you. That's what I'm getting at.
So they figure out where they've traced Kuze to a location. So they go at the location SWAT style in a SWAT style raid. And I'm a little confused about here. We can have a little fun nitpicking this whole part because what is this place? Is it like a drug den? Because there's a bunch of people doing shit with cybernetic parts and stuff, but then there's also like a white powder that's getting blown around. So I'm like, are they making like cocaine for cyborgs or like what is going on?
It's like a
here?
render farm, except instead of computers, you have people's human brains is the way I took it. And this is basically how he's, hacking into everything and gaining power by like subjugating all these people's brains and using them as like resources. That's how I saw it.
I understand when she goes into the back and she finds this room where all these like hooded bald dudes are sitting around and they're plugged into this crazy system because he calls it his human network. He's created this human network, which is going to be like a human internet or something. I don't know what it is, but it sounds cool. I'm going with it. What I don't understand is what this place that he's hiding out in is, because there's like drug dealer looking guys hanging out in there with guns and stuff. I just don't understand what this place is supposed to be. It looks like a drug den where people make crystal meth. Yet there are like human bodies and bags in there and stuff. I just don't know what it's supposed to be.
Haven't you been to raves that have similar shit going on?
I wish.
In the 90s, there's always stuff like that going on. Cocaine flying in the air, monks like tripped out and plugged into shit. I mean, come on.
Sebastian, it's a movie, man. Can't you just let it go and just enjoy it?
I'm asking is an explanation as to what this place is. That's all. The difference between you and me, Rodney, is I don't need it to make sense. I just want to know what it is. Like, I don't know what this is. What is it?
Yeah, it's like a place that the bad guy rented. He like went around. He's like, yo, where can I need to set up like an 80-person Wi-Fi extender, right?
Exactly.
Where can I do that? And where's the rent cheap? And they're like, there's this crack house, and like the back room is open, and so he rents it.
Okay, I'm good then. Thanks.
If you read the manga, you would know. It's very clear.
Is there an answer to this in the anime or the manga?
I don't know.
This scene does not exist in the anime.
There was a moment where like a female worker who just seems to be like moving cocaine around or something like that just pulls out a knife and attacks one of the guys. And I thought that was kind of funny because usually, the female worker is like, oh, cowering in the back. But this one just like pulls a knife and tries to stab somebody. And so, I feel like they're all crazy criminal villains that are either working for him or just hate cops.
The important thing of what happens here is Kuze captures Major. These cyborgs with these crazy taser weapons attack her. And so we get this kind of cool fight where their weapons are lit up and she's fighting them with these cool lit up weapons. I'm sure, Rodney, you hated this for some reason because it doesn't really serve a purpose, but it looks cool.
This part is awesome.
But why would they shut off the lights for when they're fighting? Don't they need to see?
Well, because if the lights are on, they can't see where their laser weapon's going to hit.
Oh, right.
It helps them fight.
Okay. The end result is that Major is captured by Kuze, and this is where he reveals his robotic form to her, as we've already discussed. And he's talking about this kinship that they have together, and he's hooked her up to his, network. So she's all like strung up to this human network that he's created that we're not entirely sure of what it means, but it sounds cool. We find out that she's basically a updated version of what he was supposed to be, this Project 2571. It was to basically make a cyborg with a human brain, or a robot with a human brain. And, he was the beta version, one of many beta versions, as we'll find out, and he was a failure, and she was the success. This stuff is pretty standard sci-fi stuff here. It works for me just fine.
I can't wait for you to listen to this back and hear how many times in this episode you say something like, and we get to this scene, which is pretty standard, tropey, the usual middle-of-the-road sci-fi stuff.
I like middle-of-the-road sci-fi stuff, though. That's the thing. It's fine.
Exactly.
As a person that worked in an office for 8 years, I understand. I really connect with his line where he's like, no matter what they do to you, your ghost is yours. And basically trying not to have your soul crushed by a huge corporation and working like a machine day in, day out for 8 years in an office. So that's something that I connected, where he's saying you know what, no matter what this corporation does to your body, and your soul is yours. And I connect with that, corny as it is or whatever.
He says here that he's going after these people not just because he wants revenge on them for discarding him. He wants to know what they took. And he means by that his identity and his memories, right? Is that that's what he's talking about?
Yeah, he doesn't know exactly what's happened to him either, right? I mean, they're both.
Yeah, that's how I took it. So he frees her and then she shoots him. But when she shoots him, she sees this tattoo on his chest of a burning pagoda, and she recognizes it. That triggers some memory in her. And at that point, the team arrives and starts shooting at him, but he escapes. But now our main character is conflicted because the person that she thought was the big enemy is actually closer to her than she realizes.
This whole sequence where Michael Pitt is explaining his backstory and so forth,
yeah.
It works for me. I know I complain a lot, but I like the reveal that he's not the bad guy. He's not just the cookie cutter bad guy that we have been expecting, right? When he finally reveals that he's actually got this humanity, and you get that you don't know what happened, but they did something and they put a brain in this broken robot body and they couldn't get it to work. And I guess they just flushed him down the garbage chute. I'm not sure why he's alive, but whatever. And he's really angry about it. I like that. I think that's a cool backstory.
I think it's cool, that twist that he's basically a thrown away version of her, and it's a cool reveal because then you understand why she wouldn't just keep hunting him and lets him go.
Yeah, and the second part of this sort of turn in the movie, Major confronts Juliette Binoche and wants to know how many of them there were before her, and Juliette admits that there were 98 of them. And then Major wants to know if her memory that she has of her parents being killed by terrorists was real, and we find out at this point that was all a false story to motivate her towards a career or to joining a team, anti-terrorist team.
Anti-technology team, right?
Yeah, they were anti-technology terrorists. Right. Which is ironic because that ends up being what she really was.
Right.
She was an anti-technology terrorist.
She's got 99 problems, but a ghost ain't one.
Oh. How long were you waiting to say that?
About a minute now.
So yeah, nothing Major knows about herself is real, and that's, a lot of conflict for a main character. And Ule has known who Kuze was this whole time, so she's known that that's what he was and that he was out there. Batu's wondering where Major has gone because she's gone off grid, And we find out that she's taking a little bit of a vacation by floating underwater in the Tokyo harbor. And it's a really cool shot where we see her floating and there's like jellyfish floating around her and stuff. And she's got like a wetsuit on and flippers. It's just very cool visual. So Batu finds her because he's in his fishing boat or whatever. And she comes up and they have this little conversation where she's expecting him to kill her, but, he's not going to do that because he's her homie. So they're all good. But he does want to know why she didn't stop Kuze. And she tells him that she doesn't know who she can trust, but she can trust him. So we're getting this sort of reestablishment of their friendship.
I like this whole sequence. It looks very pretty. And I like the two of them hanging out on the fishing boat and just kind of like being
Drinking
friends.
beers.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think the cityscape is awesome too. I feel like, it's just the type of site you see in cool futuristic Asian cities, but times a million, and I just love it, yeah.
But how does a cop afford a boat like that, I want to know?
It wasn't that fancy.
I'm just joking. It's a joke. I'm just joking.
It's hard to tell. You cry wolf, man.
I'm preparing to have to go into battle over every little detail with you, Rodney.
I remember when you first had me on, you said you wanted me to be quite combative. And so here you go.
It's true. I do want that. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It would be really boring if you agreed with everything, Rodney.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So what happens next is Cutter wants to bring her in because he's found out that she knows the truth about herself and about Kuze. So her goons take her in to the Hanka Corporation, which is her plan, right? Like, I get the sense that she basically just kind of let them take her in.
No. She gets off the boat and like this like SWAT team shows up and they're like, "You're coming with us," and she's like, "Okay." Like she's clearly surrounded.
Yeah, I took it as she didn't put up a fight because she wanted to go in.
No, because like if it weren't for Juliette Binoche being nice, this plan would just get her killed. This is the worst plan ever.
Okay, you're right. I think you're right. So Cutter wants to get the data on the raid out of her brain and then terminate her. So he's basically telling Juliette Binoche that that's what she's got to do. He hands her this like syringe full of red liquid, which I guess is the mind erasing liquid or whatever. She switches out the vials, so she injects some kind of yellow stuff into Major's mind, which does not kill her ghost. And then she gives her like a hard drive or something, which has the data of her real past and allows for her to escape. And then, Cutter's pissed off by that, so he shoots Juliette Binoche through the glass window and kills her. And he sets it up to look like Major did it, and he tells Section 9 that, Hanka is going to take over and terminate her.
I like the culmination of the whole consent motif throughout the whole movie, where every time they erase her memories, they ask for her consent, and then here where she's like, I don't consent to this, right. And they obviously never needed it, and now every time I say yes to an iTunes thing, I think of this moment, and I'm like, oh no, like, this is really what it's gonna be like, like nobody needs our consent to take our data. It's out there, and there's nothing we can really do, and I think that this moment kind of highlights that for me.
Yeah, she says, I do not give you my consent, and Juliette Binoche is like, we never needed your consent.
No, I mean, besides Cutter just being such a bland villain, as I pointed out, this scene's great. I like Juliette Binoche like struggling with the idea of killing like. It's not really her creation. I guess it's her creation,
sort
right?
of,
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and then I don't think she gives her a hard drive. I thought it was just like an apartment complex.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, but she injects something into her. Like, I think she gives her like adrenaline or something because she was a little bit out of it. So I think she gives her like a boost so that she can escape. Because after that, she does the whole like down on her knees, slide and hit, which I feel like is classic ScarJo. I love that scene where she just like slides on the floor and does that because she's a little bit of short.
As Black Widow,
exactly, yeah. And she's a little short stature, and so it's just like this great move, and it's kind of like a fist pump in the air moment for me.
Yeah, and so this leads Major to this big Tokyo apartment complex with 1 million apartments. And she goes up several floors and she meets this woman with a cat. And the woman invites her in for tea, and they have this conversation where Major learns that the woman had a daughter that died a year ago, and the woman was told that the daughter killed herself, but she didn't believe it because the daughter was part of this anti-tech group of quote unquote terrorists, and she was writing these manifestos. And so the mom believes that the police came after her and killed her and made up the story that she had killed herself. And she tells Major that she reminds her of her daughter and, hitting you over the head that this is who Major really is, which is fair because I think the movie's just flat out telling you at this point without really telling you. But this sort of flusters Major, and so she leaves.
I hate this scene. I think this is the definition of ham fisting. If you're into ham fisting, you watch this scene.
What is the definition of ham fisting?
It actually, when put on the spot, it's kind of hard to describe, right? But
no, literally, what does it mean?
Overly forced to the point of being saccharine, I guess. Literally, she shows up, and this Japanese woman comes out, and she's like, "Oh, hi. Come in, have tea." And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking? You don't know who that lady is. Why are you just inviting this lady into your apartment, right?
Obviously, she recognizes her ghost, something about her that seems
Chris,
familiar.
You're killing me.
Man.
She recognizes her ghost. She's she had a 16-year-old Japanese kid, and this is a 35-year-old white woman standing in her apartment.
This is the point of the movie, is that people can see this connection and their ghost lives on, and that even through ethnicities and things like this. And I also think that this is kind of one of the moments where they try to repair what they did with the casting by basically saying look, the character is Japanese and she was put in a cyborg that looks like Scarlett Johansson, which is kind of funny because life is imitating art, because a Chinese man, shortly after this movie, created a sex robot that looks like Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, really? How much?
Yeah. I'll send you the link.
Please. This is what I think is the biggest sin the movie is committing. And this is where I have to compare it to the anime, because in the anime, she is an android, right? Or it is implied. She asks a question about what her true nature is or whatever. But the whole point of Ghost in the Shell is a question of what actually makes us human, right? It's a question of, does this main character who is an android have a ghost? Does she have a soul? But in this live action adaptation, she is a human. They took a human and put a brain in a body. So the very philosophical question that it drives the entire point of the story is lost in this adaptation, because she does have a ghost. You told me that in the opening moments of your film. So I don't really give a fuck who she used to be or what happened. I already know the answer. That's my problem.
So in the anime, she's not a human being brain. Anime, she is a brain.
No, it's a human brain. Yeah, it's a human brain.
It is.
I do not believe you are correct.
It is.
I just watched it, and I'm fairly sure that they say it's a human brain in the cyborg body.
But they don't make then fine, it's a human brain, but they don't make a whole point of where she came from or who she is, right? The whole point is...
No, yeah. This backstory is original to the movie.
The reason it's called Ghost in the Shell is it might as well say in parentheses, what is a soul? What makes us a living being, right? But they're saying she was a living being and they put her in a different body. That's the answer to your question.
It's asking a different question, It's just how much can a body or a brain go through and then still retain its ghost or whatever, so to speak? I think it's a slightly different question, which is fine to me.
I see Rodney's point, because if it's just a human brain in a robot body, why would it not have a soul? It's still a brain, right?
Right. That's my point. And I just think that look, I don't know when this decision was made, right? I'm for all I know, they were how do we have Scarlett Johansson in the movie? And they're what if they put a Japanese brain in this white body? And then they had to work backward from that.
Yeah.
But it detrimentally affects the entire storytelling of what made the ultimately, the reason people still talk about this animated film from 1995 is because it was trippy as shit. It was trippy and it was weird. It made you think. And then Hollywood went and dumbed it down. And they basically kept all the visuals, but they removed the ghost from the movie.
Well, I think there's a lot of critics that would agree with you, because I remember seeing a lot of people saying that they felt that this was a dumbed down version of the anime, which is sort of fair, but sort of not. Because I do think that when you're making $100 million movie, you need to make it a little more accessible to a mass audience than an anime needs to be. So I think to say well, they dumbed it down, Yeah, if they had made it strictly what the anime was, then it would have made even less money. Like, even fewer people would have seen it.
And the anime waxes on about a lot of stuff that doesn't really pay off either. Like, if you watch it, it's like, oh, they're going on and on about evolution and the tree and biodiversity, and you're like, oh, this doesn't really make sense either. Like, come on, it's like, it's a little too much. I feel like they might have been split the difference between how much philosophy was in the anime and the movie. Yes, it was dumbed down and they might have gone too far, but I feel like if you bring a lot to it, it's bringing up a lot of things that are interesting.
It wasn't the sort of thing that occurred to me while I was watching it. Like, that didn't, I was still getting the idea that this is a person that's struggling to find their humanity and quote unquote soul or whatever. So it wasn't like that theme wasn't in there. It was just, when you really dig into it, it doesn't really work the same way. So I agree with both of you. And I do feel that there is a certain saccharine element to this scene that I certainly chafed up against when I first saw it. So Major contacts Amaki through her mental connection with him and tells him what she's learned about herself and Kuze. Then she learns from him that Uleda's dead and that Cutter framed her for the murder. Cutter's goons come after Amaki in his car, but because Amaki is the cool-ass Takeshi Kitano, he's not just going to go out like some punk in a car. He gets the drop on them and kills them. I like that they give Takeshi Kitano a scene where he gets to be a badass. It's a nice...
Oh, yeah.
A nice homage to him. He is just a badass as a human being, so it's only fitting. And then all around the city, the team is attacked by Cutter's men, but thanks to Major's intel, they all survive.
I think a few of them die, but most of them live. I will say that he has a 6-shooter and he fires way more than 6 shots in that scene. But I do love the line, "Don't send a rabbit to kill a fox." I mean,
that's a really good line.
And he's just badass. Yeah, that guy can do no wrong. And in the anime, and that's a significant improvement over the anime, because in the anime, that the police chief is like this just old bureaucrat who isn't badass at all. And they kind of like took, I think, the Chinese guy with the long hair. He had the cool 6-shooter gun, and they gave it to the chief instead in the movie, and that's definitely an improvement to his character.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, it's a cool scene. It is. It's just like that dude's like barely a character. It's weird how much the movie wants to pretend like the chief of police is a character, but he's not.
He's a very minor character, and they don't give him much to do. But I do like that they give him that to do.
Sure, like everything about it is like when it's happening, it's cool to watch him pull out an old-fashioned 6-shooter and shoot a bunch of Yakuza dudes down the street. Are they Yakuza or are they? I guess they're Honka.
They're like
robotics.
Cutter's dudes. They're his men.
It interrupts the momentum we're building to suddenly cut away from the main storyline and be like, oh, by the way, like, remember the chief of police? So now he's about to get attacked in a parking lot. And I'm like, what are we doing here?
No, it's momentum building because all her friends are getting taken out, so she has even less backup.
Barely her friends. Like, the
what are you talking about? They're the team. They're the unit. That's like her team.
They have like 2 scenes together.
There's definitely not enough of the unit as a team where we're getting a sense of who any of these guys are.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
I feel like we do get a little bit more of the chief in that regards. I mean, there's a bunch of scenes which I didn't bother to go over where he's talking to somebody, and they're not long scenes.
And he has this whole back and forth with her about when she like takes the jump, and he says, "You shouldn't have jumped. You need to follow my orders." Blah blah blah. You know, they have a little bit of a rapport.
I'm sure a lot of his part got cut out. I'm sure it was the stuff that they had to get rid of to make the movie shorter.
It really feels like there was more of him.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely feels like his role got cut out a lot. The whole thing with the team and him feels like it was cut out of the movie.
It literally cuts to like a Japanese dude who's part of the team, and he's like has a shootout in a deli, and I'm like, who's this guy? Like,
he's the Chinese guy that didn't get any modifications.
Is he Chinese? I don't know his ethnicity.
Yes, he's from Singapore. He was in Dark Knight. He was the guy that he's a squealer. He's been in stuff.
No, I'm not saying he's not an actor who's been in things. I'm just like, he's barely established. Like, okay, yeah, he's visually in this movie, but that's all I'm getting at. It's like there's no time spent with him as a team.
No, I agree. So Major drives her motorcycle. She's got a cool motorcycle, and she looks cool driving it to the lawless zone. And the lawless zone was where she lived when she was this human girl. In the meantime, Cutter's deploying his spider tank to go kill her. And when Major is in the lawless zone, she finds the burned pagoda, which was the tattoo on Kuzei's chest. And she has these sort of visualized flashbacks of the raid when she was captured, when she was a human girl. And Kuzei is there in the burnt out pagoda, and they're looking at symbols on the wall. And, he confirms to her that this is a real memory of hers, and that Cutter took her life from her, and that he was one of the radicals in this group. And, he wants her to go into his network so they can evolve and avenge themselves.
It's like kind of just, we've reached a point where I already, like, it's clear this is where we're going, right? So this is not shocking information at all. Because, like, the scene with the Japanese mother kind of already explained this, right?
Yeah. It's confirmation of what we already know.
I'm here for this, plot point, so I enjoy it, and I enjoy the fact that they finally get a sort of bonding moment where they recognize each other as, being childhood friends and both being these freaks that have been torn out of their bodies and now are reconnecting. I thought it was cool.
And we learn her real name here, which was Makoto.
Yeah.
Then we get the big climax with the spider tank. The spider tank looks a lot like Batman's spider tank in Justice League, which came out the same year. So I have to wonder if they're like special effects people were like trading designs behind the scenes.
Well, it's very close to the anime, so I'd say Ghost in the Shell has the leg up on that.
Right. I remembered the spider tank from the anime. This part is definitely...
It sucks.
A pretty bad climax, unfortunately. It's a big fight with a robot that doesn't really measure up to the sort of visuals that we've seen in the rest of the movie, because it's all sort of taking place in this burnt out area of the city and at night, and it's just a superhero fighting a robot, and it's pretty boring. Major's running around doing superhero stuff, and Cutter is controlling the robot via mental remote or whatever, which is just sort of a weak way to try to get him in there as the villain, acting personally in this scene. So that isn't satisfying. At one point, he thinks he's killed Major, but of course we know he hasn't. And then he's going to use the spider robot to crush Kuzei's head, but Major is still alive. And she jumps on top of the tank, and she like wrecks her synthetic body trying to pull like the control center out of the tank. This is the thing I like most about this scene, is her body gets all torn up.
Yeah, it's an iconic scene. Moment.
But otherwise, I'm going to join right in with Rodney and say that this climax pretty much stinks. Like, it's not offensively bad to me in the way that the Aeon Flux climax was. Remember how terrible that was when we talked about it?
Was horrible.
It's nowhere near that bad. This is just kind of... This feels like, to me, the end of like Iron Man and Thor, and this is where it really feels like a superhero movie, where we're getting the lame superhero battle at the end of the first movie that nobody thinks about or remembers because it was underwhelming.
Yeah.
And then they get to make a sequel and they do a much better end battle, and everybody forgets how lame the end battle was at the end of first Iron Man or the first Thor or whatever.
They don't even bother to set up that there are spider tanks in this world, right? It's not like there's like, at least in like RoboCop, you see Ed 209 do some shit.
Fuck yeah. RoboCop sets up Ed 209 amazingly.
Yeah.
There's a brief moment when they go into the Hanka thing where you see two of them in the corners, but that's it.
Okay, well, even that's at least a step in the right direction. But like when that guy, like when Cutter gets on the controls, he's like, "Where's the nearest spider tank?" I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Like obviously it's hard to beat a tank, and I do think it's awesome that she like pulls so hard that she rips her own arm off. Like that's fucking cool, and that's right out of the anime. Yeah. But because it wasn't set up and I don't really care about Cutter, this is a really lame way to like climax the film.
I completely agree. I feel like, they had to have this scene because it was such a big deal in the anime, and maybe in 1996, that tank design was cool and we all were like, oh, this is a cool action scene, but it's the part that I always want to fast forward when I'm rewatching this movie. And yeah, it's all just dark and dismal, and there's some terrible CG when she runs up the crumbling columns or whatever, and you're just like, that is horrible. Like, other than that, I feel like the CG has been very, very good that Weta has been kicking out for this movie. It looks great. It's visually pleasing. This is like you're all saying, just a total fail. And it's really just the worst part of the movie for me. I wish it were shorter.
It feels like something that would have been just only passable like 12 years ago, and now it just feels even more rote because it's just the sort of boring thing we've seen in a bunch of other movies. They really are trying to set up another movie, so it feels like this, okay, well, this is the weak ending, but next time you're going to get a really awesome, kick-ass conclusion. But the way it ends is kind of good. The emotional beat it ends on I like. Both Kuze and Major are all messed up. He's got his legs torn off at one point, and he's trying to get her to pour it out of her body, and go into the network with him, but she's like, no, I belong here. I want to stay. And then Cutter snipers brain him. He gets shot, but he's already gotten out. We see his eyes. We see that he's managed to somehow get out of his body, which I assume to bring him back for a sequel to or whatever. But then Section 9 shows up and they take down the chopper, and Batu runs over to Major and like cradles her in his arms and asks her real name. And she tells him it's Makoto, but he also asks if Major is still in there too. And she says that Major is still in there as well.
In the anime, they do merge. And I feel like a lot of my friends were upset that the ending was changed. And obviously it was changed for the possibility of a sequel or things like that. And I feel like in the anime, they get merged and then put into like a younger body that looks that has the same face as Major, and it's like kind of creepy. You're like, well,
yeah, that sounds weird.
He says like, oh, it's the only thing that I could find on the black market was this body. But I'm like, okay, animators, like, was that your excuse? But it's a little bit weird.
One of the important differences, and again, I know I'm saying this, but I'm trying to judge this as its own film. But in the anime, she's basically like a standard model robot. Like there are multiple versions of her throughout the city, right? So she's nothing special. They just like have turned one of them into a killer robot thing. So at the end, I feel like they just implant her into a similar looking. It's definitely like a little girl version of it or whatever. And again, I don't think that's a necessary big plot point, but that is a major difference between the two, right? Because it emphasizes the fact she sees herself everywhere in the anime version, but in this version, it's all about how she's an individual and how she feels so alone, As for the ending, I have no problem with this live action ending. Like I don't need her to merge with the internet or whatever, She lives. She beats the tank and she lives.
I feel like what you're describing, Chris, is something that American audiences would not like at all if that was the direction they were going in with the sequel. So
yeah, the cards would have gotten back and been like, what?
Yeah, I think for American audiences, they made the right call. So we just get this brief scene where Armaki confronts Cutter and says, I brought this to the Prime Minister. All right, here's a character that doesn't matter at all in this movie. Several times Armaki mentions, I'm going to go to the Prime Minister. It's like we never see the Prime Minister at all.
Yeah.
But Cutter's going to be charged with all these crimes. And then Cutter pulls a gun, but Armaki is faster. And then Major gives her consent for him to kill Cutter, which he does.
I hate it so much. It's so dumb. His job is to arrest people. He shows up and he's like, I'm going to arrest you. And I get that Cutter pulls a gun on him and he shoots him. I get that, right? But then Cutter's still alive. And then he's like, calls the Major and he's like, hey, Major, is it cool if I just like in cold blood murder this bro? And she's like, I give my consent. And he's like, that's cool. Cause like, I totally wanted to do that all along. And then he murders him. And I'm like, I don't care about any of these relationships. Like, I don't care whether the chief of police likes or does not like Cutter because Cutter is lame. And why does he get to deliver the killing blow? It should be fucking the Major, if anyone. I just don't. Yeah. It's stupid.
It's bro code. He asked her permission first. She called dibs and he's like, yo, is it cool? And she said, yes. Like, doesn't everybody know that that's how it should go down? Like, you got to call your bro before you kill his main guy. So
that's true. He is being polite. And
yeah.
I'm just glad that.
And that guy's dead. Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Yeah. I'm glad Takeshi Kitano gets to kill the guy so I don't have to see him again if they make a sequel. Which they won't.
Promise you there will never be a sequel.
So the last scene we get is Major visiting her own grave, the grave of Makoto, and her mother is there, and she tells her mother that she doesn't have to mourn her anymore, and they hug, and we see the mother like taking the plastic off of Makoto's memorial items or whatever. I don't really know what they're supposed to be, but
Yeah, I wasn't clear on that either.
I think it's just to show that the mother now can feel that Makoto is alive. She doesn't have to have a shrine
cover
for
up
her.
her, right.
And while this is going on, we're getting a closing monologue from Major that our memories don't define us. It's our actions that define us. She knows who she is now, a badass super cop, a superhero. It's very much a superhero movie ending. We've seen this sort of ending for, I don't know, pretty much every origin story of every superhero. But we do get a cool final shot of her dropping backwards off the building and disappearing, which is sort of the iconic move from the anime that we saw also at the beginning of the movie. And we end on traditional Japanese music, which I thought was kind of a nice touch.
No, I was here for it. I think the end looked really great in 3D when she's actually, a lot of those falling and long cityscape scenes looked really, really good in 3D. And, it was a great way to end it for me, with the iconic shot of her disappearing like that. And I'm here for the mother-daughter reuniting story, as corny and as out of place as it may be. Like, the whole movie's pretty cold, so, I was here for it. And I feel like it was a nice button end to the movie. And you get that badass shot of Batu kind of just like rising up with the helicopters in the back. I thought that was pretty cool too.
Like, look, if they made 8 more of these movies, I'd probably go see them, right? Because, they're expensive and cool looking. If you really want, look, I know you're going to consider this nitpicking, but I'll tell you, I think they really ruined the moment of her jumping off the building, because she starts to jump, and as she's in mid-fall, it, cuts back to the police chief, and he says, one line for no reason, and then it cuts back to her falling again. And, that's just a poor editing choice. Just have her jump off the building and slam to credits. That'd be cooler.
Yeah, that bothered me too, yeah.
You know what it is? I'm sorry, I'm just going to out myself here. I don't know who this Japanese actor is. You keep talking about how cool he is.
He was in Battle Royale, and I figure,
you don't
what
like
else
Battle Royale? He's a director of a million
Fair enough.
Movies.
I get that. And the movie keeps insisting to me how famous and important he is by how much it shoves him in my face.
He's a cult figure in Japan.
Just look at his face and his haircut. I mean, even if you'd never seen him before, you're like, this guy's badass.
And it's just weird how much the movie insists on me trying to care about him without actually giving him anything to do. And it's weird that they even give him a piece of the final moment of the movie. But her jumping off the building and waving her hand and turning invisible, perfect ending. Exactly the right way to end the movie. I agree.
Okay, so that is the end of the movie. And as we know, because it's on this show, this movie was a financial failure. I wouldn't say it was catastrophically a failure. It cost about $110 million. It made about 50 million or so in the US, which is terrible, but it ended up recouping its money in worldwide grosses. That's still a failure. It didn't make its money back when you take into consider marketing and everything. But why do you think this did so poorly, Chris?
Well, it's obvious. It's the casting of Scarlett, and culturally, we collectively had to say, no, this isn't cool. We all had to put our foot down and say, you can't take a beloved anime and cast a white woman as the lead. I feel like that was, it was poor timing, because I don't think it was obviously the intention of the filmmakers to whitewash the movie. They were very respectful in other ways, but I feel like at that moment we had to just say, look, Hollywood, this isn't cool. And I feel like everybody I knew was like, I'm not seeing that movie. Fuck that. I can't believe they cast her. And I feel like it was something that had to be done, and Ghost in the Shell kind of fell on its sword and had to be the movie that taught Hollywood that lesson. Having said all that, I still really, really love the movie for what it does. And I almost feel guilty that I love this movie so much, because Scarlett Johansson's in it. I love looking at her. I think she gives a great performance, and I love that it exists because I can watch it on my 4K TV in 3D, in 4K, and bliss out to the sci-fi goodness of it. And I feel like it's kind of an undiscovered, not classic, but I feel like there's a lot for people who like this type of movie to love here, and I think it'll be discovered after the dust settles and people can get over, that sort of bias and the casting.
I think it's definitely a better movie than its reputation allows. I think that it's as good of a movie as any first superhero movie. Like, I think this movie, in terms of the quality of the film, deserves to be as much of a success as, as like I said, Iron Man 1 or Thor 1 or any of those. Like, it's no worse than those movies, in my opinion. And I know there's probably a lot of Marvel fans out there that would want to kill me for saying that, but
yeah, Iron Man 1's pretty good.
Iron Man 1's pretty great. Like, I mean, the difference between this and Iron Man 1 is you've got Robert Downey Jr. being the most charismatic human being on the planet, as opposed to Scarlett Johansson being not the most charismatic person on the planet.
She's not allowed to be, yeah.
Right. But I mean, look, I'm just saying it's about as good as your average first superhero movie, in my opinion. And I think the visuals knock it way past that. Like, whatever it's lacking in Scarlett Johansson not being the most charismatic lead in the world, it's making up for in eye candy. Like, this movie is gorgeous to put on. Like, if you don't want to focus your full attention on it and just have it on in the background to show off your display, you can't get better than this, in my opinion. I agree with everything that you're saying about the whitewashing element being the nail in the coffin for it. But I also think that we have not seen somebody take an anime property and knock it out of the park with a huge hit.
True.
And it makes me wonder if it can actually be done. Like, if this is something that can be translated into $200 million movie and be successful. Like, maybe American audiences just can't hang with this sort of thing.
I agree.
Until somebody does it in a way that is irrefutably successful, I don't think we can say for sure, because it certainly hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, honestly, when this was coming out, I thought it was going to make a fuck ton of money. I thought this was going to be a huge hit, because my instinct is like, when I see a trailer like that, I'm like, who would not go see this movie, right? Yeah. Like, I get that maybe the reviews came out and they weren't so good, and I guess there's a certain contingent of people who wait for the reviews, right? But like, when I see a trailer like that, I'm like, I don't care how bad the reviews are, I have to go see this, right? Yeah. So it's always shocking to me when these kind of movies don't make money, because I'm like, what did you go do that weekend instead of seeing the really expensive robot movie with Scarlett Johansson, right?
Right.
And so I think what it comes down to is it's like one part, like the Japanese storytelling just doesn't sit well with American audiences unless they're into anime and they're watching the original anime stuff, mixed with future, like it's the same reason Blade Runner, both versions of Blade Runner didn't succeed, right? They're monetary failures that have a gigantic following, right? But I actually started thinking, can you think of any movies that are like this besides maybe The Matrix that have done well with American audiences? And there's just something about this flavor of like dystopian tech future that doesn't resonate with us.
I think a lot of people just don't really get drawn in by pure visual candy. Like, I think they need to have an actor there that they want to see, and they need to have something that they're familiar with, brand name IP that they feel that they can trust. And I mean, I think it's getting worse and worse as we're going on. I think we're entering a time now where people don't really want to give anything a chance if it's not branded.
I also think that there's sort of not an elephant in the room, but it's also the sort of the pervy look of Scarlett Johansson in this movie. I think turned off 50% of the audience, which is women, who are just like, oh my God, they made a movie where Scarlett Johansson's naked the whole time for 14-year-old boys to gawk at in this sci-fi universe. And like, I feel like when she takes off that coat and does that thing, no woman was saying, oh, they got it right on the anime. That's what they're thinking, like, here's a pervy movie for 14-year-old boys.
I'm sure that played into it. And Sebastian, I think you're onto something. There's like this, unless it has been like stamped pre-approved such as like Star Wars or Marvel, right? American audiences have no interest in like creative or creativity. You know, like I know that's an oversimplification, but like even this is the dumbed down version that, you know, that was made, right? They had to take a really complex movie and dumb it down, and it was still too much, right? Yeah. And like, again, I'm going to point to Blade Runner. It's like that movie, the new one, fucking Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling, and like it won Academy Awards for its cinematography. It's gorgeous, right? Yeah. And yet, when people saw that trailer, they said, no, thank you, right? That looks like that will hurt my head too much. I don't want to think. Show me that Annabelle doll again. Show me the evil nun, right?
Yeah. I feel like they're also like, yeah, they either dumb it down or lean into whatever made that property great. You know, I feel like, yeah, it's never going to be successful when you split the difference. You know, I feel like no one's ever done that, you know, well.
That's
I feel like either slash the budget and then keep it the original flavor that it was, or, you know, just splash the name on it and then take the plot engine or whatever made it great and then completely westernize it or something. I don't know what the answer is, but
look at something like Ex Machina, right? Way smaller budget, right?
Yeah.
Very similar themes, but that did really well. But that did well because the budget was so low, right? So it's like, you want to do this? You either need to make it like Ex Machina size, like you said, Chris, and, you know, you have a couple shootouts, but you keep it more about philosophy and where's your ghost. Right. Or you need to make it a fucking full-on action movie. It needs to be what kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning. I need more action set pieces, and that will draw you in. I also think that the marketing, they did a really bad job of like explaining what this movie's about. You know, American audiences really need to like, you need to just tell them the whole fucking story in the trailer. And so the trailer basically is like a mostly nude Scarlett Johansson like jumps off of buildings. Like that's what the whole movie, and she occasionally shoots robots. Like I don't even get what it's about.
Now you can make the coolest trailer in the world, and if people don't have their like McDonald's feeling about it, that it's something they can trust, they're not going to get it. You know what I mean? It's like they just want McDonald's. They don't want, you're like, look, I've got this amazing burger here. It tastes like 10,000 times better than a McDonald's burger. And people are like, but I like McDonald's.
Exactly.
You know, like we've become such a brand and IP focused society that I just don't think they're, you know, you can't sell things on just that they look awesome anymore. Right. It has to be something you know.
But you were saying it didn't flop that hard, so we can take some solace in that, you know, a lot of people did go see it. You know, it made 160 million at worldwide box office or something like that. So, you know, that's a lot of tickets.
I think that basically is like, that's who we are. Like, if you want to know how like people like how much money you, me, and Rodney generate worldwide, it's about $160 million.
Yeah.
Maybe 200 million worldwide.
Right.
So so every nerd that you talk to that you're like, yeah, we all are into this. You're all into this to the tune of about $200 million worldwide. That's how much you're worth. That's how much the bean counters probably see you as.
Not $1 billion. Right.
Yeah, it's a valid point. And I know, again, like always, I come on your show and I nitpick everything, but this movie's pretty good. It's like, it's a good time, and it's probably the best movie you've done on your show.
Thank you. I feel like
Chris is like doing a dance. He's so happy.
It's so elevated from what we got with Aeon Flux. I was like, man, maybe Rodney might like this one, and I was like, oh yes, like
it's
so
a real movie.
That. Yeah,
but at the same time, I gotta say that like I just think like if an average
Avatar.
I don't think they're going to walk away a fan. I don't think this is going to convert a lot of people.
Sure.
I think, again, if you smoke a bowl, watch this movie, you'll have a good time. But like, I don't know if you're going to want to watch it again or talk about it with people, you know, like it's just sort of like it leaves your mind as soon as it's over because it's a very empty experience.
And to your point, I want to agree with you on that. When I saw it in the theater, Jen and I saw it together, and we enjoyed it in the theater because it really sort of immerses you in it, and it was an immersive experience, and we both liked it. Then when I got the Blu-ray, I watched it again, and I found it less involving the second time. I actually got a lot out of watching it this time because I was forced to really pay attention to the plot and stuff. So that actually helped me enjoy it more. I was actually feeling like, well, this is actually pretty well plotted for one of these types of things. I think seeing Aeon Flux helped too, because I was like, this is so much better plotted than
Yeah. And the action kicks ass compared to that. I mean, like, I thoroughly enjoy the action in this movie.
I do agree with Rodney. There is something about the movie, and I do think it's just the nature of the central character that just doesn't draw you in, because she's a friggin' robot,
Right.
Like, the character of Major, there's like very little humor in this movie. I mean, we didn't talk about that, but there's so little humor.
Yeah. Well, how many fingers am I holding up? That's the only joke in the whole movie. You're right. It could have used a little bit more.
Like, I kind of wonder if you recut this movie and you actually opened on her as a little kid getting like kidnapped and like forced, whatever, taken away.
Right.
And if I knew that up front, would that change my whole experience?
Right. If you didn't try to tease that out as a mystery and just said, this is what it is, then yeah, that might have endeared you more to the character.
And it's funny, my wife was watching it, and when they said the opening reveal is like, you've been put in Scarlett Johansson's body, she was like, I'd be pretty fucking psyched. I woke up one day and had Scarlett Johansson's body, and I'm like, fair enough.
All right, guys. Well, if I have your consent, I'm going to deep dive into a geisha robot and get in my spider tank and go send a rabbit to kill a fox.
Yeah.
Sebastian, you've never needed my consent.
Awesome.